Okay, I think everybody should be in.
Great. Hello, everyone. I'm Laura Sewell, a LESPI board member. Thank you for joining us and welcome to our November general meeting. In today's meeting, we'll illustrate the steps in the preservation process by delving into how LESPI has stood up for two overlooked Art Deco buildings in East River Park that are threatened with demolition in the current East Side Coastal Resiliency Project, and how we are advocating for these buildings' preservation and adaptive reuse as the city's plans move forward. The East Side Coastal Resiliency Project, ESCR, or ESCR for short, was designed to protect the Lower East Side from sea level rise, storm surge flooding, which the neighborhood desperately needs. We're in effect fighting City Hall on one very small piece of the complex ESCR project, as we try to persuade and pressure city planners to modify their plans in order to preserve these buildings. Before we introduce this evening's presenter, LESPI's President Richard Moses and I would like to provide some updates on other LESPI activities. Richard?
Okay, slide. Okay, hi everybody. LESPI is proud to stand with the grassroots organization Think Chinatown and other community members to preserve what remains of 70 Mulberry Street, the former PS 23. Let me just get these people in. After PS 23 was tragically ravaged by fire last winter. LESPI has been present at ongoing community meetings and protest rallies to voice our strong support for preservation of what remains of this historic building. We're just getting a couple of last minute people in, so just bear with me for a minute.
Should have put a woman in charge of this, Richard. We're better at multitasking, you know?
Yeah, even single tasking is not really that, I'm not that great at. So, so here's a historic photo of 70 Mulberry PS 23 on the left. And this is on the right, what the building looks like today. We continue to advocate for restoration and renovation rather than complete demolition, including renovation and modernization of the interior and more space for community uses, all while reinstating the building's historic and much loved streetscape appearance. We're very much against the construction of a 20-story tower on this site, which is one of the alternatives under consideration, when a preservation and neighborhood-friendly solution is easily obtainable for what is probably the most important building historically in the heart of Chinatown's historic core. Next slide, please. As part of Chinatown's Art Week, LESPI joined forces Think Chinatown to prevent a wonderful photography exhibit in a newsstand at the corner of Mott and Moscow Street. This is the first time any of us are aware of a photo exhibit in a newsstand, which, by the way, has been on the site since the 1920s. This exhibit took place about 2 or 3 weeks ago. The show featured professional photographers Corky Lee, Edward Chang, and Karen Zhou, and was curated by Corky Lee and LESPI Vice President Carolyn Radcliffe. All 3 photographers are featured in LESPI's book, Chinatown, Lens on the Lower East Side.
LESPI's Chinatown book on the left turned out to be very popular with the public at the exhibit and makes a great gift. The second book in LESPI's photography series, East Village, Lens on the Lower East Side, will be featured in LESPI's December programming. Stay tuned for that. Both books are available for sale at a reasonable price that also helps to support our efforts. To purchase, please email info@lespi-nyc.org. I'll drop that address in the chat as soon as I'm not speaking, and you can find it on our website as well. Next. So the derelict former public school and community center, old PS 64, Chata Sobojillo, which was sold to the developer Greg Singer by the Giuliani administration in 1998, has long been subject to intrusion by trespassers. This activity greatly increased over this past summer, with youth regularly observed on the roof of the building and climbing down from the scaffolding that surrounds it. Some of the kids treat this neighborhood treasure, which is under a full vacate order by FDNY due to safety concerns, like a clubhouse. Others actively vandalize the landmark, attacking the chimney pots and ventilation shafts with a pickaxe, which they eventually threw into a neighbor's yard. In September, a hole was discovered in the sidewalk near the 9th Street entrance, which appeared to lead into the bowels of the building. Considering that several landmark buildings on the Lower East Side have suffered from fire damage that then required their demolition, that hundreds, if not thousands, of neighboring residents' lives and homes are at stake, and that the youth are taking great risks to their own well-being, which they may not yet have the capacity to assess, LESPI advocated with the community for the city to take action. In response to continuous community complaints that the building is not properly secured, the New York City Department of Buildings requested that Housing Preservation and Development step in and secure the building. The owner then responded and requested that he be given the opportunity to do this himself. There is evidence that some work has been done, but it is so far insufficient to keep adventurous youth from accessing the building. A recent break-in resulted in trespassers installing a rope on the roof to facilitate access from the 10th Street side. LESPI will continue to monitor conditions at the landmark and advocate for appropriate care. Next, LESPI has always held regular public events on the architecture and culture of the Lower East Side. These days, our events are presented on Zoom, which has greatly expanded our audience. In October, we were treated to a presentation by LESPI board member Marcia Economopoulos, the museum director at the Kila Kadosha Yanina Synagogue. The talk is now available on LESPI's YouTube channel. Please keep your eye out for future events like this. We'll now turn to the main event presented by LESPI board member Deborah Y., who will describe LESPI's efforts to preserve and renovate the track house and tennis center comfort station in East River Park. Just a note before Deborah begins, we're recording this presentation so it can be available on LESPI's YouTube channel, and kindly ask that you hold your questions until the Q&A session at the end. We'll have plenty of time for introductions and a Q&A afterwards. Please feel free to drop your questions and comments into the chat, especially if that helps you keep track, and use the raise hand icon only after the discussion begins so we can all focus on the talk.
Okay.
First, I want to acknowledge Richard Moses and Laura Sewell, as we three together have been spearheading this preservation campaign with the full support of LESPI's board. Here are the two buildings we are urging the city to protect: the track house on the left and the tennis center comfort station on the right. They were completed in 1938 for the opening of the new East River Park in 1939. These are buildings of both architectural distinction and historic significance, which I will discuss further. I'll also describe how we have been going about trying to save them. As Laura mentioned, they are threatened by replacement plans within the overall East Side Coastal Resiliency Project, the important federally funded effort to protect this area of the Lower East Side, which was inundated by Hurricane Sandy. The plan calls for demolishing the present park, raising the grade level 8 feet, and then rebuilding a new park on top, including modern replacements for these two buildings. We believe these historic structures do not need to be sacrificed in order to accomplish the flood protection plan. Here is what East River Park looked like right before it opened. You can see the tennis center comfort station. Get my cursor here, right here, the bottom. This is the dance circle with the bandstand, but the bandstand's now gone. Way back is the track house here, follow my cursor, in front of the running track. And way back in the distance, which you can barely see, is the original comfort station at 10th Street. That was replaced over the years. We want to save the tennis center comfort station and track house and restore and renovate them with new interiors that meet all current Parks Department requirements. Here I've listed 3 steps in our preservation process. First, highlighted in red, is our effort to secure eligibility for the buildings on the national and state registers of historic places. Next, I'll turn to how we are garnering support from the local community, first through the community board for this district, Community Board 3. Finally, Richard Moses, LESPI's president, will tell you what we are doing now to move forward. Our job is not done yet. This kind of project certainly takes perseverance. First, I'll talk about our application to the State Historic Preservation Office, known by the acronym SHPO, and I'll call it SHPO from now on. We firmly believed that our 2 buildings met SHPO's 3 criteria of eligibility for the national and state registers of historic places. We knew if we got this determination, the city would be required to give the buildings full consideration before deciding whether or not to demolish them. It would not mean full protection, but it would be an important initial step. SHPO's first criteria for this eligibility is that the building is, quote, associated with events that made significant contributions to the broad patterns of New York history. That is certainly true for the track house and tennis center comfort station, which were part of an immense and transformative project for the Lower East Side. This view shows the construction of the new East River Drive, now the FDR Drive, and also the landfill to its east, which would become East River Park. This is clearly a life-changing moment in the history of the Lower East Side, with further plans to construct public housing on the west side of the highway. The project was made possible during the Great Depression through federal funding provided by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal. In fact, New York City received federal funding for an enormous range of projects throughout the 5 boroughs. Our city is considered to have been the single greatest recipient of New Deal public works in the United States. Achievements on this order of magnitude are often credited to 3 celebrated figures in the history of New York. And in fact, the second criteria for SHPO's eligibility is that a building be associated with the lives of persons significant in our past. That is certainly true of Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia, his Parks Commissioner Robert Moses, and President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, former governor of New York. It was in fact Robert Moses who insisted on a waterfront park as part of the East River Drive project. We all know Moses as a very controversial figure who is reviled for many of his post-war projects. But historians have been reconsidering his overall contributions and refer to this time in the 1930s as the period of the good Moses, as opposed to the bad Moses of later years. But it wasn't Moses alone who secured such enormous federal funding for New York from the New Deal. For sure, he had shovel-ready projects drawn down to the most minute detail with every budget calculation figured in. But it was Mayor LaGuardia, a larger-than-life figure in New York City history, who brought these projects to Washington. Others from around the country came with only vague ideas for their communities, but with Moses's precise and fully thought-out plans in hand, LaGuardia invariably returned from Washington with necessary funding. Yet some go further and say that it was LaGuardia's close, friendly relationship with President Roosevelt that actually paved the way. FDR is said to have commented, "When I see LaGuardia coming, I try to hide my checkbook." Just to give you an idea, here are 3 of well over 1,000 projects that LaGuardia and Moses, with New Deal funding, accomplished for New York: the Triborough Bridge, Orchard Beach in the Bronx, and the Prospect Park Zoo in Brooklyn. I should note that the architect for these 3 projects and hundreds of others in this era was Amar Embry II, the lead architect for Moses during these years, and also the architect of our track house and tennis center comfort station. The 3rd criteria for SHPO's determination of eligibility is, of course, a building's architectural distinction. Here is a picture of our buildings in the year they were completed. These buildings were actually part of an ensemble of 5 such buildings that Amar Embry II designed for East River Park, but they are the only 2 that remain. Here are the buildings today. You can see that nothing significant has changed other than they could use a good cleaning, which would not be difficult.
Deborah, you just got muted again. I'm sorry. You have to unmute yourself.
Okay,
Okay.
so these are the buildings today. I don't know if you heard me say that they could use a good cleaning, which wouldn't be difficult.
Yeah.
Both buildings include striking, unique details. And what particularly distinguishes them is ornamentation that relates directly to their Lower East Side waterfront location. We'll look closely at the track house first, the building at the bottom. You see that it's a long 3-part building. On the roof of the central portion of the building is this unusual cupola. Also, here you see pilasters over here that articulate the corners of the buildings. They suggest classical Greek columns, particularly with the Greek key design found in the frieze. This is the Greek key. These elements are typical of the modern classical style of this period. It is often referred to as the WPA, modern style, in reference to the New Deal funding. There is no other park on the Lower East Side that has this very characteristic Greek key frieze design. This is the river-facing side of the track house, which has terracotta spandrels beneath the windows. You can see 2 of them here. Follow my cursor, one here, and this is a close-up. The design includes fish, vegetation, and water in a stylized pattern typical of the Art Deco style of the period. Again, this motif is related directly to the East River waterfront. Here you see one of the ends of the track house with its very pleasing proportions and detailing. Surrounding the door is another unique design motif, right here. It's a very unusual repeating pattern in terracotta. This motif relates specifically to the maritime past of the Lower East Side. Here's a close-up of the pattern. It derives from something used in shipping called a marine anchor bow shackle, seen here. Now to the tennis center comfort station. Here is the building in 1939 and how it looks today. Again, a simple cleaning would make a dramatic improvement and bring it back to new. The limestone surfaces could sparkle. You notice the same door surround we found on the track house, but the frieze here is different. It is a blue terracotta sprinkled with stars that may refer to nighttime navigation at sea. It is important to note that the terracotta ornamentation on both these buildings was custom fabricated locally in Long Island City. For our application to SHPO, we sought the support of local preservation organizations and were very pleased that so many joined our effort. You see here both large organizations, such as the Municipal Art Society and the New York Landmarks Conservancy, but also specialized groups like the Art Deco Society and the Friends of Terracotta. I'm very, very glad to report that last June, we did receive from the State Historic Preservation Office our sought-after determination of eligibility for these buildings for inclusion on the state and national registers of historic places. But as happy as we are about this, the eligibility will not fully protect the buildings, as I mentioned. It only requires that the city give them serious consideration before possibly deciding to demolish them. Our battle continued, but what to do next? As seen here, our next challenge was to garner support from our local Community Board 3. We did that in several steps. We first informed the CB3 Parks Committee that we had submitted our application to SHPO for a determination of eligibility for the National and State Registers of Historic Places, and that we were awaiting a decision. We also described our intentions to try to save these buildings. Once we had the official determination in hand, we scheduled a full presentation of our proposal to the Parks Committee, asking for their support. They voted unanimously to issue a resolution to preserve and renovate these buildings. In October, that resolution received unanimous approval from the full Community Board 3. Of course, we are thrilled and grateful for this important recognition of the significance of these buildings for the Lower East Side. Our Community Board presentations included further research beyond what we had done for our SHPO application. The chairperson of the Parks Committee had asked us to compare our buildings to other architectural resources in Community Board 3 parks. We went ahead and surveyed 37 parks and playgrounds in the district. And that area stretches from 14th Street in the north to the East River on the east, the Brooklyn Bridge on the south, and a western border that jags around Pearl Street, Baxter Street, the Bowery, and up 4th Avenue back to 14th Street. Our survey provided a wealth of information about often overlooked utilitarian park architecture of the Lower East Side. And it solidified our belief that the East River Park buildings were utterly unique in the Community Board 3 district. I will talk a bit about that survey. Here are some pages from it. The architectural elements we found include comfort stations, pool houses, concession stands, maintenance, and recreation buildings. This document is available as a PDF, and we can certainly send it out to anyone with further interest if you contact us by email at info@lespi-nyc.org. The survey is an alphabetical, fully illustrated list. Here you see 2 buildings from Columbus Park, right here. Here are more pages, including pictures of 2 buildings that have been demolished. Here in First Park, way in the distance, is a building that's no longer there. And over here in Luther Gulick Park, there's a handsome colonial revival building that was demolished many years ago. Luther Gulick Park actually has a brand new comfort station here in their newly renovated park, right here. I'll talk more about this building later. And here are a few noteworthy close-ups. In Columbus Park, we have this elaborate pavilion right here, of a kind that was a standard amenity during the early parks movement in New York. Lower East Side parks once had 3 such pavilions. 2 were demolished, and only this one remains. You see, it's from 1897. Here, on the upper right, we have a New York City landmark in Hamilton Fish Park. It is considered one of the great small civic buildings in the city. It's by Carrere and Hastings, who were the architects of the New York Public Library at 42nd Street. This building is from 1898. During the New Deal era, with immense federal funding, Robert Moses built over 600 playgrounds and added to existing ones. Here's the comfort station built in Seward Park. When that New Deal federal funding was no longer available, the Parks Department had to greatly modify their building program. To be cost effective, they had to simplify and standardize park architecture. Here, up here, in Alfred E. Smith Playground is what they came up with. A strictly functional brick comfort station type that is still found in many New York City parks today. I found 6 examples of these brick buildings in Lower East Side parks. But every so often, there are exceptions to the standardized model, as here in a picturesque concession kiosk in First Park from 1997, and below this brutalist style poured concrete comfort station in Coleman Playground from 2000. This fascinating study only confirmed what we already suspected. The East River Park buildings are indeed unique as the only structures in a Lower East Side park with ornamentation designed specifically for their neighborhood location. The survey also drove home the point that we had lost a significant amount of distinguished park architecture through demolition over the years. In 37 parks and playgrounds, I found 17 buildings that had been demolished. Here are just 2 of the buildings that are no longer there. The 1905 Pavilion in Corlairs Hook Park, and this very unusual octagon-shaped comfort station in Joseph C. Sauer Park on East 12th Street. But most important for our case are the buildings that were demolished in East River Park. As I mentioned previously, the Track House and Tennis Center Comfort Station were part of a group of 5 such buildings designed especially for East River Park. 3 were eventually demolished. I found pictures of 2 of them. They are also by architect Amar Embry II. When I zoomed in to the door on the building at the top around here, I found the same door surround that I showed you on the Track House and Tennis Center Comfort Station. And you can see also the Greek key design here. If I can find my, oh, right here. Here's the Greek key. And here's the same cupola that's on the Track House. And down below, there are stars in the frieze of the kind we saw on the Tennis Center Comfort Station. The loss of these buildings and others in Lower East Side parks is very sad indeed and represents a substantial loss to the community. We do not want to make that same mistake again. In East River Park, we also lost the bandstand that once stood in the center of the dance circle, and the building that was once part of what is now the present amphitheater. Another substantial fact we learned from the survey was that the planned replacements for our buildings are designed in a new standardized architectural vocabulary recently established by the Parks Department. Here is the Luther Gulick Park Comfort Station that I mentioned earlier. I was struck immediately when I visited the newly renovated park because this building so closely resembled the plans for the replacement Track House and Tennis Center Comfort Station in the East Side Coastal Resiliency Project, as you can see at the top and bottom. With further research, I found 5 other such buildings, varying only in color, that have recently opened or are planned for city parks. We strongly believe that the historic and utterly distinctive 1938 Track House and Tennis Center Comfort Station, specifically designed for the Lower East Side, should not be replaced with buildings that would closely resemble others all around New York City. As we continue to prepare for our community board presentations, we decided to seek out the advice of an architectural firm to help us envision what a restored and renovated Track House and Tennis Center Comfort Station might look like and how it could incorporate all the current interior requirements of the Parks Department. We are very grateful to the New York Landmarks Conservancy, one of our early supporters, which issued us an emergency grant for this purpose. That allowed us to offer an honorarium to Davies Toes Architecture, a local firm, to help us with this envisioning process. Here are some architectural drawings that show how these exceptional buildings can be saved. At the top is the current Track House, which actually has a container attached to the side because they ran out of room inside. In the middle is the planned new track house, the replacement track house. You can see that it's bigger. And underneath at the bottom, there's a drawing of the planned track house. Excuse me. Our architect has suggested a possible plan, something like that at the bottom, which would put additions at either end in a light or transparent material that would not distract from the historic structure. And of course, the interior of the building would be updated in whatever way necessary. Our own measurements confirm that the buildings can meet ADA requirements. And here's a rendering of a restored track house. Here is the tennis center comfort station with the current building at the top, the East Side Coastal Resiliency planned building in the middle, and a restored building at the bottom. Again, our architect has suggested additions at either end in materials that would allow the original building to receive primary attention. Here is a rendering of a restored tennis center comfort station. It is important to acknowledge the fact that these two buildings have lasted over 80 years, which is a testament to the quality and durability of the limestone and terracotta materials used in their construction. Lifting buildings, as would be necessary when the park is raised 8 feet, is something that is done regularly, as seen in these examples. In addition, an engineer with an initial assessment of our buildings has said that the process of lifting and moving them should not be a problem. And based on preliminary cost estimates, moving, renovating, and restoring would actually be comparable in costs to new construction. Still further, it can be noted that it is most often the greenest solution in construction to save an existing building rather than to tear it down and build a new one. Here are the current buildings with the proposed restorations. And here again is a closer look. But the battle is not over. We now take it to City Hall, literally, through the Office of Management and Budget, which oversees the East Side Coastal Resiliency Project. And we also plan to bring this issue to a wider public through outreach measures. This evening's presentation is one of our ways to find new supporters. Richard Moses, LESPI's president, will talk about this next phase in the process, describing further steps that we'll be taking. Richard?
Thank you, Deborah. We still have a pretty challenging campaign ahead of us, pushing for the restoration of these historic buildings. Here's where we are with our outreach campaign. And as Deborah said, this meeting is really a part of that and an early phase of that. Tomorrow we start our community outreach program with residents of the New York City Housing Authority buildings that border on the park. Understandably, there's a very big concern there that the park needs to be as effective a barrier as possible against future flooding. The community is also very much looking forward to new bathrooms. Bathrooms there are not great condition right now, although they are original to the buildings. We hope to show that our plan to preserve and renovate the buildings will not affect the park's floodproofing or the schedule for completion of the work to rebuild the park, and will not get in the way of local residents and park users getting completely modern bathrooms. At the same time, we've been orchestrating a letter writing campaign with our sister preservation groups, targeting the commissioners of Office of Management and Budget and the Parks Department, which are the lead agencies in the park's reconstruction, to impress upon them the importance of preservation. Now that we have community board approval, we have reached out to the local elected officials, including the city council member, borough president, state assembly member, and excuse me, and state senator for their support, and are now waiting to hear back. After we know which elected officials are behind us, we'll start a mass email letter writing campaign, and this is where all of you can help. If you're on our email list, you should receive an email from us in the next 1 to 2 weeks asking you to send a letter to your elected officials. If you live in New York City, you can participate. When you get our email, you can hit a button and the letter will be automatically generated for you. You can then edit it or not edit it and push another button to send it to all of the representatives that apply. Mass email letter writing campaigns can be highly effective. We've had hundreds of letters sent in the past for various preservation causes. So please keep your eyes open, excuse me, please keep your eyes open for our email, and when you get it, please go ahead and send it. If you're not on our email list, you can sign up at our website's homepage, www.lespi-nyc.org. I now want to introduce Marika May, an architect with Davies Toes, who's been a fantastic help to LESPI and who's responsible for the beautiful renderings of the restored track house and tennis center comfort station that you've been looking at this evening and that you can see in front of you right now. After Marika speaks, we'll do Q&A and discussion. Marika?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, Deborah and Richard, you make a very beautiful argument and present the project so well. I don't know if there's a lot for me to say. I think just coming to the project from the outside and looking at the legacy of service buildings to the city, there's a beautiful comfort station at Brand Park, and there's also pavilions within Central Park, like the Swedish Pavilion, that offer like a greater, richer history to the Parks Department. And I think these buildings are sort of in keeping with the general spirit of New York City's diversity in architecture, and sort of like have an amazing elegance to them that is so much better than the proposed boilerplate buildings. And I'm just really grateful to be able to be a part of this initiative. So thank you.
Thank you, Marika. So
yeah.
Now we're going to open up to discussion. We have a lot of people at the meeting today, so we're not really going to have time to do introductions. I think that would probably take up the rest of the meeting. But we do welcome for people to go ahead and raise their hands, and I can speak to them. I can call on them. Also, I want to acknowledge that Connor Allerton is here from the Borough President's office, Borough President Brewer. So,
yeah, I'll just say hi. Thanks for having me, and thanks for the presentation. And yeah, I think it's hard for me to say anything on behalf of the office, but like I said earlier, I'll make sure to, I've jotted everything down, and I'll make sure to take it back and see where we stand, and then I'll get back to you with that. And I think I'm good on questions for now. I think one of my questions was just how you saw this happening in light of the efforts of Esker in terms of like how this can be incorporated into the process of raising the park. And you said, but I think you mentioned that you consulted an engineer in terms of lifting and moving the building. So you said that according to your estimates, that would be possible, correct?
yes, absolutely. And as Deborah pointed out, this kind of thing is done all the time. So it's really just a matter of picking them up, moving them over a bit, putting the new fill down, and then raising them up to the new level, or something to that, extent. That the new locations for the track house and the tennis center comfort station are not far from where they are right now. So you don't even have to move them that far. You just have to lift them up enough for the new grade level to be put in. And America, I don't know if there's anything else that you'd like to add to that.
Yeah, I just finished a project in Colorado Springs. It's pedestrian bridge, and it was built adjacent to the railroad tracks, and we lifted it up and drove it over. So I'm pretty familiar with that as a process. And these buildings are on a mat foundation, so it's a matter of just supporting them enough and lifting them up as if they have ground below. So we have confidence that they can be moved to the needed location for the new proposal.
Okay, cool, thank you. And
Yeah.
I guess my other question would be regarding, I guess I'm unclear what your communication with the city has been thus far, and if you have gotten any preliminary response to this effort, or if you have any idea why this wasn't part of ESCR to begin, or if they've given an explanation or anything like that.
Yeah, sure, Connor. I can take that. It's Laura from East Village Community Coalition, board member of LESPI. Basically, the buildings were overlooked when a study was done of the park in general. So the SHPO looked at the park overall to see whether it was eligible, the park itself. But there'd been a lot of alteration of the park over the years. You see whole buildings have been demolished. So the park was not determined eligible. And I think the public only really became aware that these buildings were, threatened with demolition approximately 2 years ago when, as we all know, most of us know, the plan changed from an alternative that would have left everything in place and allowed the park to flood to the new plan to demolish the park and raise it. As soon as that happened, LESPI started looking at the environmental impact statement and started speaking in public about the buildings. When you go to the SHPO to see what they looked at, it's literally like a snapshot from a truck. There's no detail. They really couldn't have looked on them on their merits with what they were given. So we started working on that. We started working with the Friends of Terracotta, and we found out that the tiles were made right across the river in Long Island City, how custom and how particular these buildings really were for our neighborhood, the reference to its maritime history. We became involved with the Section 106 process around the fireboat house. So we have been in touch with the city team, and they are aware of, at least as of a year ago, that we were going to the SHPO for reconsideration of these buildings. And they've just proceeded with their plans. So when the SHPO is required to go back to, once there's a determination, to go back to the owners, which is parks. And what was decided on, which is called a HAPS level documentation, which Richard can explain in detail, but basically that the buildings will be photographed and drawn, plans drawn before they're raised. That's where we're at right now. We obviously don't think that's good enough. And it's certainly an inconvenient thing that the timeline is what it is, but we think that the merits of these buildings far outshine that, and that it's just not that hard to make it work if there's a will to do it.
And I understand that really the typical or the standard HAPS documentation process, which Historic American Building Survey process includes drawing the buildings as Laura said, and photographing them. But the last that I heard is that they're only going to photograph them, which is especially disappointing. But we're lucky that we're going to be presenting to the city in the near future to the city team, and we're hoping that we can convince them that this is not only the right thing to do, but it's really not that difficult, and that's what we're hoping to let them see. And it would be great if Connor, your office could get behind this. Because we really need all the help we can to push this forward.
wanted to add that the whole project is gigantic, you know, for the whole East Side Coastal Resiliency Project. And this is just like a tiny thing really within the whole project. So it shouldn't really hold up the schedule or change the timeline, and the costs we believe would be comparable. So it just seems like it really should be, the building should be saved. There doesn't seem to be any doubt about it from our point of view.
So
Right. Yeah, I totally understand your perspective. Yeah, so I'll definitely, and thanks for answering my questions. I'll like relay this to like my supervisor and see what the thoughts are. Yeah.
And
So-
we're happy to meet further, whatever, bring everyone, whoever needs to be brought up to speed.
Mhm.
We're the people to do it. I hope you've seen tonight.
No, you definitely know what you're talking about. Okay, so yeah, thanks again for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Connor. We don't really have a raise hand function. I'm sorry. This is the first time we've done this large a Zoom meeting. We've done webinars before, which are structured a little differently. So bear with us. And I apologize for anyone who came early, you know, where there was some confusion about scheduling. But we really encourage people, you know, to ask questions or
Richard, can you see my hand? I have a thing.
Yes. How did you? I don't see where the hand function is.
Well, maybe it's because you're the host.
Function is, but
Maybe it's because you're host. I see it. So if everyone looks down, if you click on participants
yeah, I did that.
and look down at the bottom,
It's not showing up for me. I guess maybe because I'm the host.
Yeah, it's not showing up for me either. I see that David Jarrett has his hand up there, Richard. Can you see that?
Oh, no. So, no, it's not showing up here. Can we get out of the share screen, Deborah?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
'Cause I think it'll be easier if we can see
Okay.
everybody. Yeah.
Okay, you want to unmute David?
Everyone's been invited to unmute, so people just have to go ahead and unmute themselves.
Okay, David, unmute yourself.
Very good.
Okay, good.
Good. I was just curious, assuming this project goes ahead as we all hope, what's the chance of restoring that bandstand, I should say? That looks rather intriguing. Is there any room to do that?
Well, we would love to see that, David. The whole bandshell issue is complicated. And for one thing, so much of it is missing. There would be a much, and it's not really part of the park's programming, the way I understand.
can we just clarify if you mean the dance circle or the amphitheater? Because there's a little.
The small band shell.
Just the surviving part of the bandshell? Or the original building that the bandshell is part of?
Well, the picture I saw, the small little band shell, it wasn't a big one.
I think it's a dance circle bandstand he's talking about, in the dance circle, right?
I think he's talking about the amphitheater that has the shell.
Oh,
Does it look like an arch, David, like this?
No, it looks like it's just a circle.
The cylinder, that's the dance circle, yeah.
dance circle bandstand.
So the only thing that remains of that is really a very low cobblestone, you know, maybe not even knee-high wall. That's a circle with two or four ways in to the center. So that is just long gone. And as far as the SHPO is concerned, whatever, you know, having something intact is key. That's like their probably #1 criteria before, you know, along with historical significance. So they wouldn't be involved in that. And as far as I know, that there's nothing like that included on the programming for the new park. In fact, I believe that Diana Carulli, who did the labyrinth that's on the ground within where that bandstand used to stand, is looking for another place to recreate her labyrinth. There's a movement all around that too. You want to learn more. But unfortunately, I don't think there's much we can do to get that back into the programming. It's tight because a lot of the space is now, the land space slopes down. So we don't have as much surface area as we have in the old park. And so they really worked to put as much of the programming in as they could for the sports fields for the kids. That's my understanding, just in terms of what we're going to tilt at, what windmills we're going to tilt at. That's unfortunately my understanding.
Okay.
Susan, I see your hand is up.
Thanks, Richard. Good evening, Laura and Deborah. It's so great to be on a LESPI call again and hear the updates, and just such excellent work, really impeccable. I'm so impressed. And I'm Susan Mckeown. I've lived on the Lower East Side for 30 years, and I have a nonprofit. I guess our goal is to create new systems of community self-care through culture, and we're mostly working with youth, targeting 16 to 25. And one of the things that came up today, even in a conversation with a local politician, was the lack of places to, as one person put it to me who grew up in Jacob Riis housing, we have nowhere to bang our drum, to sing our song, to dance our dance. And I've talked with Laura about the dance circle, and talked with people from Baruch houses who used to have dance events there. In fact, I have that on video of him standing in that circle. It's an incredible space surrounded by those trees. And when you stand and look out at the north, south, east, the points of the compass from the middle of the circle, it's just got a special energy about it. But anyway, sorry, to my question. It's interesting because, Richard, hearing you say things like encouraging them to do what is right, a lot of us on the call know in a deep place what is right. And that's some of my work is looking at placelessness and the importance to people of their environment and the mental and emotional well-being component. But it's hard to articulate that to institutions when we're living in a world that's full of these different systems. So that's why our work is about trying to develop new systems that center community self-care. And part of that well-being is from the bottom up. So yeah, it's trying to make that case when people, think of it as something over there, whereas it is something intrinsic to everybody's well-being, particularly when youth are living today in a world that's increasingly digitized, that's commodified culture and social life. I don't need to tell you guys, but I feel like maybe there's I'm looking increasingly and for ways to articulate that in a better way, because it's impacting everybody's mental health, but most of all, those living, with economic deprivation that's generational and other issues like that. So I don't know if you have anything to respond to that, but yeah, what we know is right, and we feel, and it has to do with feeling an experience of life and access and opportunities for all, and the lack of cultural space, just how it's just eroded. So it's never been as little as now. So surely it's going to pitch the other way. And
Right.
Good luck with this, because I've enjoyed watching this, and you've done everything so well. I'll stop talking now.
No, Susan, don't stop. You're so beautifully articulate. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think somebody like you who feels so passionately about it should somehow reach out, and maybe we can get enough people that once the initial project is done, they somehow arrange for some place within the park to have the opportunity for people to enjoy music and dance,
And yeah, another point to that about the actual amphitheater, and I was really interested in that because friends of mine tried to hire it to put on events. It's so prohibitive. It puts up so many barriers for actual people in the community trying to get together to do something and use space. Some of the stuff that's top down and just built in systemic now makes it impossible for young people together to have a great idea. Forget it. So
Yes.
I've written to Linda Jones, passed me information for the person who she believed was taking care of the amphitheater, and they passed me on to somebody else. And I've emailed them twice to see if I can connect them with youth who live in NYCHA housing and in the Lower East Side to have input on crafting a vision for the amphitheater, because I did think, wow, it could be so much more. It could be an all-weather performance space that opens up, but I have not received a reply. I mean, it's months now, and it's not acceptable anymore within communities when the city wants to, when the narrative is not meeting the action on the ground.
It's very possible that COVID-19 has put a stop on many of these projects, because I know many city agencies have cut down on staff, to skeleton staff. Maybe it's something that could be picked up again after we get out of this pandemic. But don't give up, Susan. Please don't.
Susan, I reached out to Parks Department. I was doing a research project on performance spaces in the Lower East Side, and looking also at Thompson Square Park. And I have a contact at Parks Department if you want. She contacted me back immediately. She's in charge
I would
of.
love that.
Yeah, maybe
Thanks, Marika. Plus, I'd love to know about the project you were doing, because I am an artist, and I've seen, all of this stuff disappear, all of the music clubs and all of the video stores. So I'd love to know
there
more about
used
the
to be an
project you're
amphitheater
working on.
at Thompson Square Park, or a small pan shell that's gone too. So I think this erasure of they're preserving all of the athletic fields, but not necessarily cultural spaces. So
Yeah, I mean, Charas, which is the one we all know. Yeah, I'd love to see your project and give you input if you're interested, if you need it, if you haven't finished. And thank you, I'd be most grateful. Laura has my email address. Thanks, Marika.
Well, thank you. Thanks.
SCR, I believe that there also was an amphitheater committee or a committee to look at what was going to happen to that space and how to create a new space. I don't know whatever happened to that.
I believe, thank you for reminding us of that, Helena. I believe that's a working group within Parks. And I think one of their main concerns is that a lot of the residents on the waterfront are impacted by noise, and the hope was that the new design would give them some relief from that. They literally feel like, since most of it's gone, that the events are happening in their living room when they go on. So it's definitely something that needs to be bridged. But I think it's a working group of CB3 Parks, and I know some people who are on it, so we can connect on that too.
So, Barbara?
Yeah, actually, I was going to ask about the amphitheater and what the status is. I recently wrote an article for the Village Sun about my experience performing there many years ago in a Greek play, and I discovered when I arrived there that the producer, who was from Germany, had hired private security to keep the local kids out. And she told me that they had been throwing stones at the actors on the stage. And I was very confused by that. And I was sitting in the empty house before it started, because I used to smoke at that time. And a little boy was standing there, and there was like some fencing on the other side, and he was about 10, and he asked me what was going on, and I tried to describe the plot of Oedipus Rex to a 10-year-old that would make him excited about it. And he left, and the performance started, and throughout the performance there was a slight hum from the audience, and I realized that it was that this little boy had gone home, got his friends, they each had grabbed the mothers, the aunts, anybody who could get them past the security, and the buzzing was them whispering the translation in Spanish to the adults. And we had one more performance scheduled. I was a replacement, and I said to the producer, instead of barring these kids, why not put a synopsis in Spanish in the program? And she was like, well, I don't want them here. And I won't even just tell you what language she used, but I was very happy we were rained out and I didn't have to do a second night. And I was just horrified that this this was a usurper coming into a neighborhood park and denying the children, most of them from the public housing, the use of this park. So when I saw that the amphitheater was in danger, I wrote this article for the Village Sun about it, my experience there. And, you know, I don't know what else to do on my end besides letter writing and maybe writing some more articles or whatever about, you know, some of the personal experiences of some of the local people, but not, I mean, I'm on the cusp of the Lower East Side, and it's not my local park, but I feel as protective of it as I do of any of our historic places and you know, local ownership of our places. And I was horrified to see the action of all the visual artists who came to paint the whole amphitheater, hoping they could get it saved. And within 24 hours, they came from the Parks Department and water sprayed all of it off.
But they have no budget for maintenance.
Right, yeah. Yeah, but I mean, the community wants its park and it wants what belongs to it. And you know, and I think sometimes these government officials think that these places belong to them. You know, they belong to the government, not to the people. And they forget that the government is there at the will of the people. You know,
Sometimes
so
they're looking
I
for
think
the
it's
most
important.
expedient,
Yeah.
Yeah, I just
the
saw.
most expedient way to deal with something, you know, that causes the least waves, costs the least amount of money,
Yeah.
and get it done as quickly as possible. I mean, that's why these buildings are being replaced by basically generic replacements. You know, you may or may not like the individual designs. I think as a group, we're not thrilled with their designs, even though as a group, we are in favor of modern architecture. But more than that, they're cookie cutter for all the parks, as Deborah said. And so it's really trying to do things with the least amount of fuss, least amount of muss, and just get it done, you know, and steamroll it through. So we're hoping, you know, if we can make some inroads here, that would be, you know, that would be great. And we do have to keep pushing, and that's why we're hoping that you all, you know, will help with our letter writing, because one of our ex-board members works for city council member. He's worked for a few of them over the years, actually, and he says that that these letter writing campaigns, when the council person's inbox starts filling up with emails from dozens or hundreds of people saying, please save this, please do that, please don't do that, it makes a difference. I mean, it really does affect them. It may not cause a 180-degree turn, but it may, and in any case, it could end up with some kind of a compromise position where the council person is trying to satisfy a group of their constituents that are clearly passionate about the issue. So that's why we're hoping that this letter writing campaign will be effective, but we're not ready for it yet because we have to make sure we're not targeting the elected officials who have already gone ahead and sided with us on it. I mean, that would be a little bit unfair.
Almost there.
Tom, how are you?
Hi. Does anyone know what kind of metal the cupola is made out of and the eaves? It looks like it might be something like an interesting kind of metal.
It's an interesting point. I don't know.
Well, the roof is made out of slate, isn't it?
The cupola itself, Deb.
Oh, the cupola itself, yeah. I don't know.
I wondered if it might be Monel metal or something, which sometimes people look at as being historically significant.
Oh.
I don't know how you test for that, though. I know that Monel is made of copper and nickel, I think, right?
Or it's a general meeting or it's the general meeting. it's not clear. I was going to reach out to the like secretary and say, hey, we'd love to get an update on this. I'll probably just chat on the phone, like,
everybody.
passionate about the area, like, da, da, da.
Hold on.
And then when, Richard, can you remind everyone, when do you think that the time is going to be right for agitating and letter writing and any other social media kinds of initiatives?
We've got it together. That's how you get shit done. Organize it.
Hold on, I have to mute this person. Okay. So we should know within the next week or two which elected officials are going to be siding with us on this and which may not. So that's what we're hoping, that we'll be able to send something out to everybody then. Of course, if you don't want to use our mass email, you don't have to. You can send your own email or edit ours the way that whatever you want to. It is editable. Mm-hmm. So you know, there's a lot of leeway on whatever you want to do. But certainly, hearing from constituents is a big thing, and we want to include on the email list the mayor's office. So even if you're not, you know, living in the Lower East Side, and it's not going to go to Carlina Rivera, who's the council person who's most on top of this. It seems to be her jurisdiction primarily, even though it straddles Margaret Chin's district as well. Sending a letter to the mayor and sending a letter to the Parks Department will certainly go a long way, as well as your council person, because if your council person gets a bunch of letters, then it could very well get back to Carlina.
Do you know her position on it at this point, Carlina?
No, we kind of kept them up to date on the issue in a general sense, but I don't think we've gotten any feedback, Laura, right?
I'll just say that it's the council office usually does not take a position until after we get a CB3 full board vote. That's just traditionally the way it works. And that's fairly recent, that we were at Parks only in October, and full board at the end of October. So I think the obvious concern about the timeline is all that's been really expressed. But we will have more details on all of this soon.
And this has to go through the commission formerly known as the Art Commission, doesn't it?
Well, that's all been done, which is what's so odd. We're looking at a final environmental impact statement that should have gotten an incomplete in so many more ways than this one, but don't get me started. But in the urgency to use federal funding, which is not, no other area has received that. It's a big deal. So in the urgency to use the federal funding for this project, and we get desperately needed storm surge and flood protection for the area, the city is plowing ahead.
And yeah, it's actually gone out to bid, and have they picked the contractor yet?
My understanding, they have not yet.
Yeah, but they're just about there, and they're starting all kinds of paperwork. So it's really the 11th hour. But as Deborah said, this is such a minute part of a big project that it's really just a change order item, and shouldn't be a big deal. So Wendy?
Thank you. Hi. I just want to thank this group for all your work, and sorry my camera doesn't work, but thank you for all your work on this very important project. It's going to make a huge difference in the future park, which, without this would be so sterile. So I'm really hopeful that, all your efforts come to full fruition. And, it's hard to imagine how it's going to actually work with the park being higher, but, buildings can be lifted and as well. And so I'm excited to see it. I've been noticing, though, as I walk in the park, there's other historic things there, like the drinking fountains that are cast bronze, that are from the same era, and wondered if that's in your purview at all. And I came in just as you were talking about the dance oval. and the labyrinth. And to me, one of the saddest realities of the design of the new project is they don't make space for all the dancers. And if you've ever been in East River Park, you've seen people dancing. Even the new stage is almost right on the path. I mean, there's just some really awkward things that they've designed in that are going to bring people who are on bicycles and kids playing in water, like really close together in a little bit scary way. So I hope all of it fits better than it looks on paper. And I'm part of a team, and just so you know, I'm part of the group East River Park Action. And what we're working on right now is, at least what I'm working on right now for them, is working on air quality monitoring. Because pretty soon the trees will be down, the park will become a big dust bowl as layers and layers of landfill are added to it. And that's, 45 acres, 8 feet deep. That's a lot of barges and trucks moving the fill around. And so I'm really concerned about public health at this time. And most of us in the neighborhood know that the NYCHA houses nearby are closed right now. People here were talking about young teenagers and nowhere to sing their song. Most of the NYCHA campuses now from, and maybe you already know this, Delancey all the way to 14th Street along the river are fenced off. All the green space is closed right now, and they're putting in FEMA-funded storm repairs and storm hardening. And it's quite shocking if you walk through there, how much work is going on, and you think everybody's there living through it, and how disruptive that must be for their life. And, right now the city is saying if the work in East River Park gets, it starts being polluted, close your window. That is their response right now. And we know people who live right by the river don't necessarily have air conditioners or even fans. So there's really to me, the public health issues are big, but I'm really thrilled that you've worked so hard on the preservation of these beautiful elements in the park. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Wendy.
Thank you.
Richard, I don't know the answer to the water fountains. Do you have any thoughts? No.
No, you really piqued my curiosity, Wendy. Do you happen to have any photos of these that you could send over to us?
Yeah, I sent one to Laura today in an email.
Thanks.
Do you want to forward that one?
I will. Thanks, Wendy.
At night. But there's also grates that are from that era. There's things that lay flat in the ground. And I don't know, there's the big anchor at the 14th Street end. And I don't know that falls in your purview, but those are things.
A little bit borderline, but it certainly sounds interesting and something that we'd want to look into. So,
okay. Maybe Laura and I can take a bike ride through the park one day and take some pictures.
I'll send it to Richard, and we'll go from there.
Deborah,
okay. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, Tom.
Real quick, the what's left of the amphitheater, besides the part that was demolished, there's still some kind of interesting stuff there. Is that all slated to be completely removed as well, I guess?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
We're hearing that it's compromised, and also that because it does not, offer any sound protection to nearby residents, that it needs a different solution. I'll see if I can't get I can definitely get in touch with the people who are working more in depth on that and see if we can get a report from them.
We have an open mind about what to do with that, the remnant of the original bandstand. But it's a tricky situation. And I guess we feel that it's such a heavy lift, figuratively and literally, for these other two get these other two buildings saved, that we've really been focusing on them. But, you know, I think now that we've gotten a lot of people's attention about these two buildings, if there's other things that we want to throw in the mix, it's something that we can look at. We just have to strategize, you know, when's the best time to do it? What's the best way to do it?
It would be so cool as a folly, even just as an artifact, even if it wasn't reused as a band shell.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the argument would probably be that only from having gone to too many parks meetings, that there just isn't room for anything that, you know, isn't programmatic. And for us, we have no way to protect it. We can't use this process that we use because it's been so greatly altered already. And so little of what's original remains. That's what these buildings have going for them that the other places we're talking about just don't have.
Well, we're a little bit over, which is fine. Are there any last questions or comments?
No.
Yes.
No.
Well, one thing I want to mention, first, you know, I want to thank everybody for coming, and I think, you know, hearing people's comments and questions was wonderful, and thank you, you know, and we, you know, we'll be doing every other month a program of community interest and also letting everybody know, you know, what we've been up to over the last 2 months. So we, you know, we encourage you to come back to these bi-monthly meetings. And one thing we do ask is if you can donate something to LESPI, that would be great, because we do need donations to keep doing our advocacy work, to keep doing our programming such as this or the webinars that we've been doing. And you know, it would be great for people to chip in. And to do so, you can go to our website, www.lespi-nyc.org, and do it that way. And as far as tonight's presentation, if you came in late, or if you know people who wanted to see it and they weren't able to, you can check on LESPI's YouTube channel. If you go into YouTube and search LESPI NYC, you should come up to our YouTube channel. We have a bunch of interesting webinars that are posted up there that you could take a look at, and we'll be posting this one as well. So this one will probably be posted in the next week or two, and hopefully, you know, if people missed anything, you'll have the opportunity to see it then. So thank you all again. And we hope to see you all in 2 months, if not sooner.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.